Well, first, thank you. The Sovereign Fund Summit that we're having today is an opportunity to create a platform for African sovereign fund and strategic funds to be together, to launch an alliance, and to look at the best practice that have existed in other countries in terms of running strategic fund or sovereign fund. So this is the first meeting. We believe that it's going to be an exchange of best practice. We have invited the Singaporeans who have quite a large experience on this to be in the summit today. And we believe that at the end of the summit, one of the takeaway will be the alliance to start working with a group of sovereign funds and see how to start doing co-investments in some area. And we think that in this context of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, this is an opportunity for sovereign funds to also play a role in the implementation of it.
All right. Now, Gomes, we do know that a couple cities or even countries have been built on the back of sovereign funds. People would definitely tell you that New York itself, as we know it today, was built on the back of sovereign funds. When you look at our economies that are rather nascent, growing but still smaller, do you think that sovereign funds are actually the way to go to build our economies? And, well, if they are, what way could we better channel this?
Well, first of all, I think we shouldn't look at sovereign fund for a solution for all of our problems. I think it's one of the instruments that we should use. And that's why, in terms of the best practice, it's important for governance of these sovereign funds, how the investments are selected, how the information are disclosed. So there is some basic best practice that we have to comply with. There's no innovation on that. We have to make sure that we manage the resources of this sovereign fund in a very transparent way. But the thing here to add is that sovereign funds in Africa need to work together and create synergy for co-investment. You don't need to have billions of dollars in your reserve before doing a sovereign fund or a strategic fund. You can start small, of saving for strategic purpose in the country. Again, an opportunity that we have now is that Africa has a map where we want to be in 2063. We have a fast-track set of projects that the African Union have decided to implement. One of them is the Continental Trade-Free Agreement. We have the speed train. We have the creation of financial institutions. We have the commodity strategy. All are, I would say, low-hanging fruit projects at the continental level. Who's going to fund those projects? Obviously, we cannot just wait for foreign aids or foreign institutions to help us on that. I think we can start, we can seed those projects with strategy and then leverage other funds coming for other countries to do that. So this is a formidable opportunity for sovereign funds to play a role toward the goal of regional integration in Africa. Regional integration is not just an issue for state and state institutions. There is a role here for African champions, African multinationals to play a role to implement the regional integration agenda that we need. If we don't do that, we don't survive. So we're bringing the sovereign fund out, seed some of these projects, and we think that this meeting today with this report will be a first step. We are working also with the African Development Bank, and as you know, there will be an African Development Forum in South Africa in November, and I think also the initiative will be playing a role toward that event. That will be an opportunity to get, again, the sovereign funds together and see some of the results of our interaction and synergy.
Paulo, I think this is going to be my last question because I know you have a tight schedule as well, but something to do with sovereign wealth funds. Now, we do know that Africa receives the lowest share of investment from sovereign wealth funds, and most of the times we do see that the investors themselves are looking for higher returns, and most of the times it has a political bias on the back of it, you know, for the country of origin and all of this. Do you think necessarily that sovereign wealth funds are typically treated different when it comes to Africa?
Well, I think many of the sovereign funds outside Africa don't know Africa well. They don't have a good idea of the risk. They don't know how to profile the risk of our country. So it is also a role of the sovereign fund to get in touch with these sovereign funds. For example, the sovereign fund in Singapore has been doing some investment in Africa, but sometimes there is a issue of having the right information, the right set of deal flow that can be initiated together. We can take the first shot of risk of those investments as African Sovereign Fund and bring them on board. So I'm quite optimistic that if we get organized and do our homework and map out very well the set of projects that we want African to own, because it's about also owning our assets. It's very good to say that Africa has huge reserve of commodities, mining and others. If we don't create a mechanism to fund the development of those commodities and structure them in a way that it become assets owned by us, I don't think that we will be able to change the structural issues of our economy. If we want to move from a commodity exporter to a continent that could process its resources, I think it will have to structure proper companies, projects for that to happen. So this is a kind of just a first step. Again, the issue is not to have everybody on board at one shot. You need to start with a small group of champion or people who believe that this can be done. And, people like success, so they will join in when the first set of results arrive.